The caterhamracer.com America's Road Trip is sponsored by DPR Motorsport, your competitive advantage, and by Design and Display Structures. Immerse yourself in worlds beyond with bespoke projection screens. And just Add Lightness, high-performance LED lights and accessories for the Caterham 7. We're also supported by Darren Burke, Performance Driver Coach, and by FPZero Simulators. So, here we are once again. We did it 3 times and we've liked it enough so much, we're doing it for a 4th. We're back again for more caterhamracer.com esports action here tonight. And we start a brand new series, a brand new knockout series, as we did before with the Euro Winter Series just then. We're now going onto a little America's Road Trip. All right, we can't really go to the Americas, but we're going to do it virtually. We're going to do it here with a tour of some different American and North and South American circuits in order to see if we can find ourselves a America's Road Trip champion. We're starting here this evening here at the magnificent Watkins Glen International Raceway. It's a circuit just near New York. Of course, a former F1 Grand Prix venue for the United States Grand Prix, also hosts IndyCar, NASCAR, and has also hosted IMSA and a couple of other major series as well. And now we get Caterham racing here in the mix as well. Scott Woodwiss and Chris Hutchinson back on the mic once again. And Chris, it's good to be back. It's good to get some pre-season practice in. We're not having the season start until roughly middle of April. Early mid-April when we get kick things off at Cadwell Park like we did last year at the beginning of August. But until then, and as the drivers seem to continue liking it so much, we put in another series, another knockout style format all the way through to a last chance saloon race, and of course then the grand final, which is happening, and we'll see the schedule in a second. But yeah, we're back at it again, and it's nice to be back and nice to be doing something else which so far has proved very popular amongst the Caterham Motorsport paddock, as well as other people joining in.
Yeah, good evening everybody. It is good to be back and good to be sharing Caterham Racer online again. We haven't actually stopped too much in the downtime. We've had a few events and sort of challenge series in the background, but it is nice to be back on the stream, and it feels like a little while since we've been here, so we'll get rid of all the rust and off we go. But yeah, all the drivers are back on here. You'll see some many familiar names. We've got some new names as well, which we'll go through throughout tonight's racing. We've got a 25-minute race tonight, and the damage is back on again, so we've got some damage on the servers to keep them all true to life. And say we'll go through some of the new names, but we've got a massive group. We've got 18 cars due on grid A here, but we've also got 16 drivers racing on our B grid tonight, so they're also having a race in parallel with us at the moment.
So let's just take a look at the schedule then. Of course, as we say, we're going across some of the best circuits of North and South America. We're starting here tonight at Watkins Glen, and once again, as it has always been, every Tuesday evening now for the next 6 weeks, including tonight. Starting tonight here at Watkins Glen, then we go to our only South American visit, which is the Autodromo Jose Carlos Pache, or Interlagos as it's known, in Sao Paulo, for our second qualification race. Then we go to 2 circuits which have very similar names, and I almost got confused on the screen thinking it was exactly the same venue, but we go to Road Atlanta, which is the home of, I think it's in Brazelton, Georgia, if I'm correct, and that's the home of the Petit Le Mans. That's going to be on March the 2nd, and then Road America, which is in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, and that's going to be on the 9th of March, and then our last chance saloon race would be a very, very fine circuit. It was a circuit which Caterham at one point were either going to try and take some drivers in real life and ship over their cars for a race at one point, which sadly fizzled out, but it's going to be WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, a fantastic circuit both in real life and in the sim. And of course, if you know Laguna Seca, it's one corner everyone fears, the corkscrew. And to watch these guys go through there, I'll think about that later. Never mind that, because then we get to the grand final and we're going to Canada and to a circuit which I knew a little bit about. I know that Chris and the guys have been racing during the period between the two series that we've had, this one and the last. Mont Tremblant in Canada, which I think has been a former Champ Car venue. They've hosted sports car races before, and it has also hosted a round of the F1 World Championship. It has run the Canadian Grand Prix once, and it is quite a fearsome circuit. It's one of those circuits, Chris, we talked about it briefly, where in terms of great Canadian circuits, people know about Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. They know to a certain extent about Mosport, but not many people do know about Mont Tremblant. It really is a circuit which hopefully by the time we get to the grand final, more people can discover, because I've driven it in a racing game before, and you've driven it with the guys here in the sim. It is quite a circuit, and there aren't that many circuits. It's a very naturally flowing circuit, lots of undulations and hilly sections, and lots of winding parts through the natural scenery. it's quite a circuit, and it's one that's not really like anything else that's in Canada, or at least in North America.
No, it's an absolute gem of a track. We tried it. Someone suggested we have an event there in the off season, and we did, and we had some absolutely spectacular racing. So yeah, really looking forward to showing that. Like you said, you'd maybe heard of it, but I hadn't heard of it before I raced it the other day, and that's unusual for a track, especially one that's, like you say, got some history behind it with some Formula One and some Champ Car potentially on there as well. But yeah, we're really looking forward to showing you that, and yeah, if you're on a sim, or if you're lucky to live in Canada, why not go and try it out for real?
Absolutely, and we'll get to that, of course, towards the end of our series, because that'll be the lead up to what I presume with them the next series coming, which I'm guessing will probably be in tandem with the real Caterham Motorsport calendar as the season goes along. So yeah, already planning that ahead as no is. Of course, to talk about that again once more. Again, that starts up on April 10th, 11th, and I'm pleased to say, as we talked about before in previous broadcasts, of course, you'll be back in the driver's seat again. You got a bit of a chance to test your car. I think just before Christmas, or just after. No, just before Christmas, before we went back into lockdown again, because you're stepping up to the top level now, the new 2021 spec Caterham 7 UK Championship. So you're going to be along one of many drivers now going on the quest to become only the second ever British Caterham champion. And I think I probably know the answer when I asked the question. Are you excited? Oh,
absolutely. I've only tried the car in sort of the standard 420 spec, but we've got all the new parts and the slick tyres to strap onto it before we get out there for real in April. So yeah, I am absolutely looking forward to getting back. It's been a while since I've been in a race car, so it'd be great to get back on the track and turn in laps.
I had heard from those testing the wet tyres when I did the first proper test that apparently they've got so much grip that literally however much you try to throw the car around and how much speed you want to try and carry into the corner to try and break traction, they just wouldn't. So impressively, it looks as though you've got some pretty handy wet tyres if the typical British weather decides to turn and take a turn for the worse and decide to precipitate rather heavily now on you. But hopefully it won't do that too much. Let's go back to sim racing action before we start talking about real world stuff maybe a little bit later on. We're into the qualifying session at the moment. James Murphy, who is ever a front runner, of course, former Caterham champion in real life and road sports. There he is. It is a virtual 420R, which I know I'm guessing as well during the period that we've had, there's been more and more refinement from more of the input for the drivers that we've got. Because, of course, the majority of the drivers here, they've raced as Caterhams in real life or drive them in real life. So all the feedback they've been given to Bonobo and Giles have journeyed to improve these cars, to make them even better with the physics and the handling. We've been absolutely vital to make these cars as realistic and as close to the real thing as possible. I guess particularly now they're going, once we start getting some data on the new 2021 car, they'll start to update it even further. But James Murphy fastest at the moment with just over 5 minutes to go. Interesting enough, Andy Parker second quickest. Now, Andy Parker, looking at his details, he was racing in the academy last year, and he's a part-time social sim racer turned fanatic since joining Caterham Race. He's virtually coached by Darren Burke, so there you go, one of our supporters of this particular season of caterhamracer.com. Darren Burke has been retained once again, so we thank him for his support on that. He's been giving Andy a bit of tuition here, and it seems to have paid off. And in the real world, he says, Palmer Sport Driver of the Day, August 2020, and he's undefeated at the Caterham Trials event at Palmer Sport in 2010 and 2020. So 10 years apart, but still pretty handy.
Andy's absolutely one to watch out for this season. He has been putting in the mileage off season and has really shown some really good improvement, and obviously helped with Darren and his online sessions. So it just shows how the importance of driver tuition and how that can really help. So he's rocked himself to the top, like you say, and yeah, definitely one to watch out for this season.
And looking further down, Will Rossetti, who's a notable name from real life Caterham racing we've had in the past before. We've also then, of course, got James Fowler, who's up into fourth place. He was one of the trio of drivers which came up from which were racing together from the class of, I think it was I got it right now. It was the Academy White group in 2019, where they were the trio of Tom Willis, Blair McConaughey, and James Fowler. In fact, all three of which are back again tonight. So we'll see those three doing a bit of a dance between each other on track. Then we've got Christian Zaruta, who's a multiple-time race winner in real life in Caterham's. There he is in the Brawn GP Special, as I like to call it. Fifth quickest for him. And Chris Skillicorn, who was I think it's right now, the vice champion in last year's Academy Green Group, because he was behind Tom Cockrell. So Chris Skillicorn, I'm sure, will be back once again this year in Caterham's. But he's now getting his virtual.
I believe he's racing in the graduates this year. He can't do a full season, so he's doing some races with the graduates. I think he's doing three events this year. See whether he can continue his good form.
well, fingers crossed. And if he comes across Tom Cockrell, I'm sure that Tom will certainly give him a good fight as well. Steve Barnell, 7th quickest at the moment. Paul Fernerhoff, who's one of our racing sim racers, in 8th. And then Guy Crawford, who we always say at the same time, he always impresses and gets in and around the top 5 and in the podium positions, down in 9th position. And then Richard Gallagher had some impressive races last year in the last 2 new drivers that we have to talk about, which should join us for this one. We first of all have John Lang, extraordinary looking car in terms of a colour scheme. You can't really miss it. We can find him on track in a second, because John, there he is, and you can see, now I've dubbed this car the Cadbury car because it looks a little bit like, if anyone's ever bought a bar of dairy milk that's the 30% less added sugar in that cut, then it's got a similar colour scheme to that one. But a bit of a weird analogy, but bear with me on that one. So this car, definitely one to look out for, at least in terms of a colour scheme. And he's got one fun fact about him, he's got a DIY sim rig. He's got a wooden frame, car seat from a scrapyard, DIY vibration motors and bass shakers, a 3D printed wheel with his own electronics. And it's the current project, he's making some custom pedals. So this is pretty impressive that he's running a completely custom setup and putting it to good use here as well. And he's got no in real life racing experience, but he has been racing in doing some endurance with the Missed Apex F1 podcast. I know a couple of the guys over there, so good to see we've got them involved. Now this has been interesting, Gio, because we have 2 drivers on the grid. You'll see there are 2 drivers with the surname Knight. Now car number 10. This is, I've got to get this right now, because this is Hudson.
That's correct, yep.
Yeah, it's Hudson. So Hudson with the yellow roll cage. Now, we've also got Jason Knight with the red roll cage. Now, Jason is a real-life racer. He competes in Citroen C1s, so he's decided to jump in. And if I'm correct, he was doing some racing over with the PC sports cars a lot in their series, but he's now jumped into Caterham Racer, I'm sure with some familiar names that he knows from there, to give this one a crack. But also he's invited his 11-year-old son, Hudson, and you did hear me right, he is 11 years old. He's the youngest driver by far that we've had in caterhamracer.com, and actually holding his own pretty well. Actually, he's going quicker than his dad at the moment. He's quicker by half a second, so son beats father, which is pretty interesting.
And Scott, don't forget, we've got a grid of 16 that he's also beaten in pre-qualifying to even make it to the A grid, so he's done exceptionally well. And in our off-season, he's been racing extremely well and consistently getting some podiums and all sorts, so look out for Hudson as we go in. We've only got 38 seconds of qualifying. They can finish their laps that they're on. We've already said that James Murphy's looking all set up there to leave off or to return where he left off and in winning ways, but Will Rossetti is ever there, and Parker, as I said, has moved up the grid. McConaughey doing a good qualifying performance in 4th so far, and sometimes we see him having disappointments, so that's great to see. With Fowler, his shadow, Sharuta a little bit further down than maybe we're expecting to see, so he's got a bit of work to do, and then the Skiller's gone on El Fernie, the kind of midfield that you might expect, and they're going to have I'm sure, an intense battle all the way through. You can see how close everyone is. We've got pretty much the whole field covered by just about a second. Jason at the end there, just a little bit further off the pace, but yeah, everyone going well.
Yeah, so checkered flag is out on the session, and he said there was a couple of movers whilst we were going through some of the housekeeping, some of the formalities with the introducing some of the drivers for the season. So James Murphy then, unless anyone else puts in a pretty rapid final lap, looks as though he will be on course to start tonight's race in pole position, where Rossetti, as we mentioned, has popped up to 2nd place. It was Andy Parker who was P2 quickest for quite a while, until Rossetti's managed to put himself up there into 2nd place. Andy Parker 3rd, and Blair McConaughey, who was for quite a long time in that session outside the top 10, managed to string together a clean lap and put himself onto the 2nd row of the grid. Good stuff from Blair, the Scotsman, and I think that's him on track there, just nosing it into the barrier. So to spare his blushes, we move to Guy Crawford, who has got up to 5th with his final effort. So a good effort from Guy as well. I love the fact I always seem surprised whenever he pops up into a good position. But he's been doing this for the last few races anyway, in the last couple of seasons. And he's someone who doesn't race in real life, but he does drive a Caterham in real life. So he's experienced with these cars to some extent, driving them on the road, but at least in the sim he's making full use of it. And I reckon even if he popped himself into the academy, if he had the money to do so, I reckon that he could be pretty handy behind the wheel of a real Caterham race car if he give himself a chance.
You certainly need to know car dynamics and all the sort of fundamentals of driving, and quite often we see people who are good in the simulator can transfer that across into real racing, because real racing actually you get more information, seat of the pants and just the feeling of the car. So it's kind of, you can get drivers who aren't so good at the simulator side of things. They don't translate the two feelings, but generally speaking, if you're fast in the sim, you can translate that across.
It looks like he certainly has on that side, even without the racing experience. The sim experience seems to be working well for him, as you mentioned. So, 5th quickest for him, 6th for James Fowler, 7th for Guy Zaruta, Christian Zaruta, brain's not with it, 8th for Richard Gallagher, 9th for Chris Gillicorn,
We
10th
just seen
for Steve
Sharita
Arnell.
pop up to 3rd.
Yeah, just spotted that when he popped up there. So up to 3rd goes Christian with his literally pretty much the last lap of the session.
Absolutely.
So, and of anybody. So, an impressive effort for him to put it in late, but he has managed to get it in onto the 2nd row. So, countdown just before we get tonight's 25-minute race underway. James Murphy then to confirm will start on pole position. Alongside him will be Will Rossetti in the golf-coloured car. But it's Christian Zaruta with his literally the final lap of the session, pretty much, puts himself on the 2nd row of the grid alongside a much improved Andy Parker. Watch for him go from 4th. Then it'll be Blair McConaughey and Guy Crawford on the 3rd row of the grid. James Fowler and Richard Gallagher start on row 4 in 7th and 8th. Then Chris Gillicorn and Steve Arnell will make up the top 10 in 9th and 10th positions. 11th place for Paul Fernhoff. John Lang will start his first race with us tonight in 12th. And it's Jensen Hassler, who was pretty impressive in the Euro Winter Series by pretty actually hassling, with no pun intended, so some of the faster guys sort of throughout the field on a number of occasions. But everyone else seems to have caught up, even that who's maybe a little bit sim rusty in terms of racing, and will start 13th. But I think watch for him to make his way up through the pack, as I'm sure will also possibly Mark Bennett. He should be usually further forwards, but seems as though he's maybe a bit sort of race rusty. So watch for him from row 7. But also Tom Willis, who's now a 2-time catering champion because he won last year's road sport category. And then we've got Hudson Knight, who beats his father Jason, who starts in 18th, and they sandwich Fun Cup race winner and also very experienced Jay Shepherd, who is back once again with us, thankfully, in 17th place. I'm sure, if I'm correct, he will be back out this year. I think he will anyway, in this year's Fun Cup. So, with his own Team 7 Wasp squad, with his partner Edward, his partner in the Wasp company, and also his co-driver Ed Worthington. So, watch out for that for him from the back of the grid. So everyone then lining up on the pit straight. Of course, the layout we're using here tonight is the full Grand Prix circuit with the inner loop, just under 3.5 miles or 5.5 kilometres, and it has got plenty of turns. It's got lots of long corners here with couple of big stops. The big stop we've got really is down at turn 1, the 90. But they've got the high-speed uphill S's, the back straight where we get a little bit of slipstream, and then the very fast bus stop chicane, which we call the inner loop. And then they go through the right hand of the outer loop, down through the chute, then through the boot section, through the toe and heel, and then back through the last couple of corners to come back onto the pit straight. So it's a bit of a dubious question, Chris, but can you pick a winner here?
Well, James hasn't been on the servers much in the off-season, so I don't really know what form he's on, but certainly putting on pole position really helps that, doesn't it? Christian there popping it up as we might expect. Paul Fernhoff much lower down than we might have thought as well. I can't put it past James as the lights come up, but I'll call James. Why not? It's an easy bet, isn't it?
Well, let's see if your bet proves right. We're about to get another season of caterhamracer.com underway. The America's Road Trip is about to start here at Watkins Glen in New York, USA. The red lights go out any second now, and 25 minutes of racing is underway. It's a pretty clean start from everyone so far, but he says that rather tensively because we know what happens sometimes at turn 1. It's a run up inside for 2nd place for Christian Zaruta, but it's Murphy with the whole shot. Rossetti in 2nd place, then Zaruta and Parker, and followed by Blair McConaughey in 5th. So top 5 have stayed pretty much as they were. James Fowler's up to 6th at the expense of Guy Crawford, and he might lose one more spot because Richard Gallagher's also moving fast up the inside, and they're 2 by 2 in the mid-pack through the S's. That's quite a risky move early on here, but even so, they're pushing hard to make up places in these first few corners. But now down the back straight towards the inner loop, this very fast right, left, right bus stop chicane, and it's Murphy who leads the way as they turn in. Zaruta is up to 2nd place, goes round the outside into the entrance, and then James Murphy almost tries to promptly throw it away by skipping over the second part of the chicane. And now you can see behind for 2nd place, everyone's stacking up here because you see Will Rossetti trying to repass Christian Zaruta exiting the outer loop and down towards the chute. But look at Andrew Parker and also always Rossetti just really cut off the avenue there for Andy Parker as he looked up the inside. Into the chute they go. And now we've got Blair McConaughey trying to get in the mix as well. So Murphy now is outside what we call the magical half-second range because usually the slipstream effect and the Seto Corsa, the sim that we use here, for these cars, it only really seems to kick in when you're within half a second. It's a little bit sort of, it's kind of like loosey, it's kind of like DRS, but no detection stuff. It's literally, you get a draft once you're within half a second. So this is the key thing. If you can break away from that pretty quickly, he might well be able to start pulling away and getting a gap, particularly if the cars behind him here, Chris, start to keep on battling as they have been all the way through this opening lap so far. It's getting pretty tasty out there so far. One driver that's dropped a little bit further back is Tom Willis after a small little mishap. But again, I say touch wood, and I say rather nervously, Chris, everyone's got to the first lap okay so far, and looks as though there's not too many dramas if there were any. If there were, they're mostly towards the back of the field.
Yeah, it looked like James might be starting to break away, but everything's calmed down a little bit now, so maybe they've got a chance to catch up. Just a little bit of a nudge there. A guy, I think, just tapping the back of Fowler's car. It's really difficult to go side by side here, as it is everywhere. These are fast open corners for the most part, and they were going side by side to the S-bend, which is exactly as we see Fowler. They're diving down the inside. Great move there, but drifting out wide. We will see people drifting out a little bit wide of that corner, and it does cost you time. But yeah, the side by side does cost you a lot of time, especially going out onto this back straight. So you can expect that these three will now drop backwards to the clutches of the cars, Skillicorn and co behind, because of this movement they're doing now.
And of course, the more they battle, the easier it is for the cars in front to start making a break. And speaking of battling amongst each other, I just spotted that Zeruta and Rossetti were side by side on the run down the back straight, and they're going too near 3 abreast. There's some smoke in the background for somebody after they've had a mishap, or either put a couple of wheels onto the grass or had a spin from some contact. One driver would see Shepherd and Furner have changed places for 13th place, but this is the main battle at the front. It's still between Murphy and Zeruta. Further back here, we've seen Richard Gallagher, who's now getting stuck in here with Chris Skillicorn, Steve Arnell, and also Jensen Hassler. He's in the black and blue machine. Of course, he finished high as second at one point in a couple of races in the Euro Winter Series events, particularly I think at Zolder behind Christian Zeruta. So he's now trying to make his way up through the order, and he's alongside Chris Skillicorn, but he slots in because he realises that discretion's a better part of valour. But that now puts him under threat from Steve Arnell behind in 11th place in the orange and green machine. The lead is then out of the toe in this boot section of the circuit on the Grand Prix layout. And you see now, still watching Richard Gallagher, but in front now, I did see James Fowler still battling with Guy Crawford into the heel section of the boot. As they turned with this downhill right hand, there's a puff of smoke, so either there was a bit of contact or someone locked up around wide. One person that has spun round is John Lang. So unfortunately, he's dropped towards almost the tail of the field. And Tom Willis, whatever stripe he hit, Chris, has gone right to the tail of the field in 18th place and some 11 seconds back. So back there he is in the background. Whatever befell him certainly hasn't worked out well for him either, has it?
I wonder if he's now got some damage because of that spin or incident that he had. Certainly that is possible, and he could be nursing a bent steering arm or something, which could really affect the entirety of his rest rate, which is a shame given that he's got 20 minutes left to go. But everyone else is certainly putting on a good show. Rossetti is back ahead of Sharuta now as he go into turn 1, but he's got the tight line, which is going to affect him on the way out, and we know that this next section is fast, so Christian at the moment is sticking in line, which is probably the sensible decision if they want to catch up with James Murphy at this point. But everyone else really, really tight, Scott. Really, the racing's great at the moment.
Yeah, about 6 place backwards. It's a very, very hard-fought melee here. We're looking at Steve Arnell on the back of Jensen Hassler as they come up through the S's once again on this third lap of the race as they come out to the right-hander and out onto the back straight. And again, 2x2s. What for Steve Arnell, who he's now we're seeing side by side between Hassler and Skillicorn, and just in front of them we've got Gallagher. Oh, and there's contact. I think we kind of possibly could have seen that coming, as we see that Gallagher was involved in that. Oh, and you see James Fowler gets collected, I think, either haplessly by someone else, and everyone's collecting each other, and there's several cars that have been affected by that. There was quite a lot that happened in that sequence. Trying to tell who was affected by what was tricky. I think Jay Shepherd was involved in that, either him or Mark Bennett, one of the two. Jay Shepherd's been dropping down in that, but it was pretty much that battle that was going on for 5th, 6th and 7th, mainly between the likes of Guy Crawford and who was in there as well. It was James Fowler, and I think also Richard Gallagher was in there too. Just that scrap set off a chain reaction that's affected 2 or 3 drivers in the process, and it's unfortunate, but that's what happens when you try and go 3 abreast into the inner loop, because it narrows up so much it really isn't going to work.
That's right. It was just 3 by 3 rather than 2 by 3, wasn't it? And a little touch of wheels caused the incident that then led to the scene of the crime. And I think Mark Bennett's a pretty unfortunate and unlucky driver, and he seemed to get caught up just as Fowler was trying to rejoin back to the track. It was sort of just a trajectory that they couldn't avoid, so there's a lot of incident from one little touch of tyres, basically. It was Skillicorn losing the rear end there as well. Really twitchy on the rear end, these cars. If you get them slightly unbalanced, they will lose rear grip, and it does cause you to have a big moment that you've got to catch. Again, we see James creeping away here as Rossetti and Sharuta fight. Worth pointing out, Scott, and reminding everyone that everyone's trying to get a top 3 spot tonight for their qualification to the grand final. If you finish outside of the top 3, it doesn't count for anything. You've got to come back and you've got to qualify again. But if you finish in that top 3, you will gain your automatic spot then in the grand final.
And for future races, of course, we'll surely have drivers which will do all the races, as many races as they can. If you get any drivers who compete in the subsequent races, let's say from the top 3, as let's say provisionally, if James Murphy, Christian Zaruta, and Will Rossetti, if they stayed like this and all took the 3 promotion spots, if they then came back next week to race at Interlagos and they finished, and any of those 3 drivers finished in any of the top 3 spots, they effectively will be sort of kind of ignored in some cases. They will still finish in one of those top 3 spots, so they won't be moved down anywhere, but then that promotion spot will then go to the next car behind them that hasn't been promoted. So just notice we've lost sadly Jay Shepherd, so I think the damage he must have sustained from that little skirmish or that kind of carambolage that happened up at the inner loop seems to have affected him enough damage-wise to put him out of the race, sadly, which is a shame because he's in the sim he's usually quite decent, particularly when he's at one of the Virtual Fun Cup cars, but sadly not much luck with the Caterhams. But yes, going back to the promotion spots, as you rightly pointed out, Chris, top 3 go through and get their automatic spot for the grand final at Mont Tremblant. But as we mentioned, if there's anyone who in the next few races who finishes behind someone who has already qualified that happens to finish in one of the top 3 qualifying spots, then it'll be the next person who hasn't qualified that will then who could move into one of those spots, who will then get that spot as well.
And we will
do got that, so
we will do our best to explain it as we go along in those next few races. We will call out the drivers that have already qualified, therefore we can disregard them from the results and keep an eye on who else needs to get their spot. Rossetti has definitely not shaken off the McConaughey and Parker train, and this is now turning into a 4-car brigade here. So this race for the second and third spot is definitely not over. And Christian currently is in that nice spot in that now Will Rossetti's going to have to start looking in his mirror, and Christian maybe can think about breaking away. You can see already there's a gap as Will Rossetti's having to look backwards as well as forwards.
Yeah, so Rossetti trying to get defensive, but all he's done really here is open the door for Len McConaughey to take a peek into the 90, the right-hander of turn 1. And also not too far away is Andy Parker, who is putting all that tuition from Darren Burke to good use as he heads up through the S's, watching these 3 in front of him dance around on the tarmac in front of him through the S's. And McConaughey's had to just give up the position and fall back into 4th. We're on board with the Scotsman now. Pulls to the outside after being in the draft of the golf-coloured car as he heads down towards the inner loop. Now, will he be brave enough to go deeper onto the brakes and sweep across to take the line? The answer is yes, he will. He almost did have to force him to pull out of that, and Rossetti gets very sideways. I think possibly McConaughey maybe unintentionally just cut across his line a bit too much there, and Rossetti didn't really expect it. I think either there was a bit of contact, or McConaughey's line forced Rossetti to have to take the curb because maybe Rossetti didn't want to back out as much as he really probably should have in that move. Just got over the curb a little bit unsettled, and he did very well, Chris, to catch that. These guys, you said, very nervous, but with that situation, good car control reflex to catch it and stop it sliding.
Amazing to catch that one. That looked like it was an accident happening up until the point he caught it. So, yeah, that curb on the inside has a vicious bump in the middle of it. You'll see the drivers when they're going even on their own, they will have to ride that bump. But I think Rossetti caught it at a sort of really a strange angle, which speared the car into the air. Yeah, really good control to manage to get that back and actually only lose that place. I know Andy Parker's now right on his tail, but he only losing one place is pretty much a miracle, I think.
Yeah, so quite quick hands there from Rossetti to hold that slide and to what could have been an even bigger incident for him. So he maintains his current spot at the moment in just outside the top 3 now that Glenn McConaughey's got through. And just see the 2 Knight siblings have gone through together in 10th, 11th. It's Hudson to the head of Jason, and these 2 actually have been pretty decent so far. They've actually managed to keep themselves out of trouble and slowly and steadily move their way through into, well, for Hudson just inside the top 10, and then just the fringes behind there is Jason. There's a bit of a rear gunner for his son as they come through the right hander of the final corner onto the pit straight once again. So pretty decent debut so far for these 2, of course. Like as we say, Jason's got experience racing in the PT Sports Cars Catering League, but he and also not only has he managed to come across, as we mentioned, but his son Hudson also has come along, who's quite into his sim racing himself. And I have to say, for someone who's 11 years old to be in the top 10, their first race in this one, fair play. That's a really good run. So I know we're currently these days it's more the sim generation of those who are growing up on these simulators and driving them in some cases maybe than others who might not be able to afford karting. But for someone who's that age to be able to up them the top 10 mainly against quite a few drivers who race these cars in real life, again, if I had a hat on, I'd take it off to him, because this is a fantastic run so far for him.
Absolutely, and doing what you need to do in these situations when everyone else is losing their head around you. You keep yours, keep your nose clean, and then the seas will part around you, and that's exactly what's happened. So, yeah, top 10 is no mean feat, and remember that this is only the top 10 of this first 18. We have another 16 drivers all competing as well, so really at the top third of all the races that we've got going on at the moment. So that's a great feather to your cap. It's a really good one. As we see Parker looking up the inside of Rossetti, not yet able to make that move, and Rossetti doing a good job of defending.
He is. I think he's trying to make up for almost losing the back of the car a couple of laps ago, and he knows he has to go defensive, but really all that's done now, because he was in within half a second, it has kind of just opened up the door here for Andy Parker to possibly sail around the outside at the heel here through the boot section, and he holds his line, and he knows if he can stay on the inside here, he will be on the right line to possibly take the place and relieve for Rossetti at fault. But it looks as though he has. Yes, he has. So Anthony Parker getting through, and Rossetti maybe getting a little bit frustrated, losing another position, just stood on the throttle there and hung the tail out. And I know sometimes these Caterhams do like to be thrown about a bit, but getting sideways in one is not exactly the way you want to try and earn some speed. He's got to be careful now, because now that's broken away from the sort of larger chasing pack behind, which seems to, as I say that, broken up a little bit, apart from the battle of the 7th, 8th and 9th. Guy Crawford's broken away from that battle. He's just about 2 seconds away from these two, who continue to scrap, and I'm sure if they do continue fighting, that gap's going to get even smaller between these two. And the orange car behind of Crawford in 6th position. And just behind them, I'm seeing a couple of position changes going on. Chris Skithercorn's gone up to 7th at the expense of Jensen Hassler, as we continue to watch these two still go wheel to wheel and side by side. They're careful, Will, but last time you went trying to go side by side with somebody through an S-bend, it didn't quite work out in your favour, and I think he's probably realised that. He's slotting in behind Andy Parker onto the run to the back straight, and Parker knows that he's going to try and pull exactly the same move that he just did a couple of laps ago. So here comes Rossetti then. Is he going to try and go around the outside? Is he brave enough to go for it? He realises, no. I remember a couple of laps ago, it's not going to happen again, and it was Parker that almost got sideways there as he rattled over the curbs, but thankfully he's held on to it, Chris, and Rossetti this time, from being the hunter, he's now become hunted, he's now become the hunter as he presses on. But I wouldn't count out Guy Crawford behind. He's certainly closing in pretty quickly. Yeah, definitely. The top three look fairly settled at the moment. As they go and throw it off into the scenery. There's still 11 minutes for them to be, time available to do that still. But these guys are certainly showing that they're hungry for every single place. And again, it's showing that kind of balancing act of, you can make a dive up the inside of someone, but you're going to always compromise your exit. And around here, the exit counts for pretty much everything. And you've seen that whoever's coming out behind, coming onto any of these straights is generally speaking the one that's putting the pressure on. Again, Parker having to go defensive, so you can see that Will Rossetti will be looking to go do the same thing that he did last time, which is keep her on the outside, which turns into the inside for the next corner. But the inside of this next corner is very slippy, as Will Rossetti found last time, but he has made that move stick for now, although Parker again looks at the inside. They just don't want to be anything other than side by side, do they? No, but again, I don't think either they do or they don't realise, one of the two, either way, that Guy Crawford has snuck up onto their tail, and he's now less than a second behind. He's almost about 3/4 of a second back now, and about a lap ago, half and a half ago, it was about 1.9. So, again, proof that all this battling is not really helping them out. Not only are they losing time to the cars in front, losing time to the cars behind as well. Rossetti gives him a bit of a friendly shove there. Come on, get out of it. I want my 4th place if you don't mind. Now they come down the straight, still wheel to wheel. It's like Senna and Mansell at Barcelona, 91 this. But heading into the 90, and they're still side by side on the exit. Rossetti will not give way. He has to hang out around the outside. If he's got the grip and confidence, he will go to sweep in front here through the first part of the S's, which hasn't worked, and they're still side by side. But now Parker thinks, right, maybe I should slot in here and try and get a bit of a slipstream and try and get him back at the inner loop if I can. But now look at Guy Crawford. He is now within the half a second range. We talk about it, the magical half second range. Here they come down towards the inner loop then, with just under 10 minutes to go, 9.5 just under left on the clock, and they rattle over the curbs as they go right left and then left right through the inner loop. And they come to the next corner, the right, this long right-hander that takes them around what's called the outer loop. And then rather than going quickly straight on here to take them back through what would be regularly the NASCAR circuit, they now go on to the Grand Prix circuit here. So that takes them into the chute, and of course then into this boot section here. So just quickly having a look on the timing screen, it's now almost 3 seconds the gap for James Murphy to Christian Zaruta. So 2 DPR drivers leading the way first and second. Glenn McConaughey is a further 1.2 seconds back in third, as we see the aerial shot here of James Murphy all on his own, a bit of no man's land, and having a casual Tuesday evening drive here by the looks of it. But I imagine the fact that Christian Zaruta is still 3 seconds behind isn't giving him cause to relax too much here, as they turn their way out of the boot section once again to head up the hill towards the left-hander. 8.5 minutes to go. In the background, there's contact. Into the wall goes Andy Parker and Guy Crawford. Now, Blair McConaughey was there as well. I'm not suggesting that he was involved in anything, but it looks as though possibly, maybe it looked as though that
I saw it happen.
A bit too much.
I saw it happen, Scott.
What did you say?
Will Rossetti and Parker just lost the rear end of those cars in synchronicity, and unfortunately, that gave Guy Crawford nowhere to go. So it was just the 2 cars losing in front of him that just ended up wiping out his race, and obviously the 2 of them ended up in the barrier. But there was no actual car contact; it was just a loss of rear end.
Interesting. I thought for a second it's Will Rossetti because Blair McConaughey's up the road. So, so Will Rossetti then carries on in 4th, and he was lucky to get away with that. But sadly, the battle that Parker and Crawford were having, it was for 5th and 6th position. It's now become a battle for 8th and 9th because of that incident. So now into 5th position. Bear in mind, he started about 12th on the grid or so, even further back.
I think it's further back.
Hassler's up now to 5th position now, which is impressive. He's brought Chris Skillicorn and Steve Arno with him to play. But now, this is the new fight for 5th position, and they're going to go at it just as hard as Parker and Crawford if you're in the background. Oh, careful, it's going to be 3 impresses. Arnell goes to the inside line. Look at it through your hands. This won't be pretty. Into the right hand of the inner loop, and they all try and back out of it at the same time. Hassler goes around the outside of Skillicorn, who really backed out of that, and looks to incredibly, it's Steve Arnell who passed them both on the run down towards the inner loop as they came to the braking zone. So that gamble that Steve Arnell played, Chris, there, he absolutely played it blindly. He picked off 2 moves to the price of 1. And he forced both cars to back up whilst they were fighting each other. Impressive stuff from Steve.
I mean, that is a brave move. Even in the simulator world, that's a brave move. And to pull it off and actually make that happen, that's great. I think in real life, you'd certainly be clenched. But yeah, really good to see that come off well. And everyone's still facing the right direction, which is unbelievable.
Yeah, I remember the phrase that Richard Hammond used once before to describe James May when he was one of the specials. I expect he's clenched in there. Anyway, he's probably unclenched now as he's battling with these guys. And now it's a proper 5-car scrap here. As now Arnell back under threat from Hassler, who's under threat now once again from Skillicorn. And look who's arrived on their tail. Both Andy Parker and Chris and Guy Crawford, who are still having their own private battle. And also look behind as well. Look who's also catching up to this. It's the pair of Knight siblings, Hudson and Jason. And if these 5 keep on scrapping, which I'm almost certain they will, there's 6 minutes to go. There's a real chance here, Chris, that both could catch and they could get stuck in here. But if shenanigans keep on happening, dare I say, one of these guys could even get in the top 5 on their debut night. This could be a really impressive first night for them if they can get that far. And it all depends on what happens between this quintet if they keep on battling this hard and this heavy. Yeah, and it doesn't look like they're going to let up, does it? So, yeah, there's every chance that they'll come into it. There's still a long way to go. I mean, I guess that's one really good thing about a 25-minute race where everyone is having these great battles is lots of stories develop throughout the race and come and go. But as we're coming to the end of this race, you can bet your bottom dollar that Hudson will be aiming to catch up with these guys and see what he can do. And the good thing is he has got his dad Jason as a rear gunner behind. So if the likes of John Lang and Paul Fernhofer and Matt Bennett start to close in these last 5 minutes or so, he has got a bit of defence to bolster him there. As they're going to go 3, Derek 4. I want to say 5 abreast for a second there, but they're all starting to sort themselves out. They head into the inner loop and Arnell's still there. Has to try and take to the curbs and the grass. They all shuffle their way through the inner loop. And somehow, I think also with Crawford and Parker got through that as well as did Skillicorn. That Skillicorn's been shuffled down to 9th. So he was about 6th or so going into that sequence. He's lost 2 or 3 spots. And actually, look now, Hudson Knight has now managed to catch up onto the back of the top 5 to make it a sextuplet now. These 6 cars, or a half dozen here as they come up as to shoot towards the booster. They're all together now as you see Hassan trying to go up the inside of Arnell here. Crawford tries to get into the mix in the braking zone. Both have run wide. Crawford looks up the inside and tries to be ever the opportunist. He's passed 1. He's going to pass 2 if he can. He's on the inside line. Look at Parker passing Arnell as well. Skillicorn's in there too. Hudson sat back thinking, I'm not getting involved in any of this. You sort yourselves out, boys, in front of me. Down towards the heel here in the boot section. Side by side for 5th. Into the right-hander. They're still side by side. Hassan braves it out around the outside. Arnell and looks like that. Sorry, other than Parker still in the mix there with Skillicorn, and Hudson Knight watches on with Jason also for rear gunner company as well. They're still side by side. That's the phrase of the night, isn't it? They're still side by side because they are. And now back towards the left-hander here in the last couple of the corners to end the lap. Still just under 4 minutes to go, and Crawford's not going to give his way up. He goes round the outside of the penultimate corner, inside line for the final turn back onto the pit straight. Parker's back up the inside of Steve Arnell. Here comes Skillicorn onto the back of them as well. You can hardly breathe here for a second. It's incredible stuff, but it's one of the best races I've seen for a while in caterhamracer.com. There have been some good ones, but this scrap here for 5th place downwards is one of the best I've seen for quite a while so far, at least overall in the 3 or 4 seasons that we've had. Is now going down the outside and running wide there with Steve Arnell, but he gets back onto the road alongside Andy Parker. Chris Skillicorn watches on. Crawford seems to have finally got the move done, I think, because no, he hasn't. Just has back with him on the inside line. This is fantastic stuff from these guys. You wouldn't tell it's the first race of the season. It's like an end of school season finale, but this is fantastic. We've got 5 more races of this to go, so they carry on like this. It'll be a fantastic spectacle, one of our most competitive seasons yet. And here comes Hudson Light on his debut evening. Remember, this kid is 11 years old. He's got so much maturity here to sit back and rather than stick his nose into battles, he is just staying careful, not putting his nose in where he doesn't need to be, and waiting for these guys in front to make a mistake amongst themselves. This is I have to say genuinely, I'm not saying this for the sake of it, this is really mature drive from Hudson here for an 11-year-old. This is fantastic stuff. Sim or not, great stuff at the moment.
Yeah, really good to see. And this battle, like, spoiler alert, we've done some test events on some of the tracks coming up in a bit, and we saw battles just like this. These American tracks just seem to really promote it because of the long straights, some really good racing. So yeah, really hopeful that we're going to see some of the best racing, as you say, from caterhamracer.com, and certainly on the looks of this, we've got it.
Just for a quick nod to them, if we watch this, because they're going 3 wide down towards the heel here, as Haster wants to try and pick up 2 places for the price of 1. He tags the rear end a little bit of Guy Crawford, loses the rear end, but they're still going to be roughly 3 abreast on the approach up the hill towards the left-hander to go back onto what would be the regular NASCAR circuit. John Lang's also in there too, in the blue and purple car just at the back of this train, as it continues to get bigger and bigger in a typical Caterham fashion. You watch a Caterham race in real life, there's 2 or 3 cars that start battling, then another 2 or 3 cars join in, and they join the group and make it bigger, and they battle with them, and another 2 or 3 cars join, and another 2 or 3 cars join, and the train just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until you get 2/3 of the field in one big group together battling over positions. You get from first down to 14th place, or scrapping for track position, scrapping for 5th now, back up the inside goes Guy Crawford. Quick note for the top 4s, we have kind of ignored them a bit, but not on purpose. It's because the racing is so good. James Murphy leads by almost 4 seconds from Christian Zaruta. Blair McConaughey's a further 2 seconds back, and 3 seconds back from him as well, Rossetti. That's the top 4 covered. Back to 5th position. It's now 3 of them now for 5th position. There's also side by side there between Arnell and Skillicorn. Jason Knight has passed Hudson, so father passed his son to get himself up into 10th position. This is the main fight then. 3 of them for 5th, 2 for 7th, as they come down towards the 2 for 8 behind, because it's 3 cars battling for this 5th position, into the inner loop through this quick little bus stop S-bend, and still nose to tail as they come up through the right-hander and into the outer loop. So nose to tail as they come up through the right-hander of the outer loop onto the Grand Prix circuit again. Hassler has the inside line here, wants to try and pick up 6th position. Parker will try and escape here in P5 if he can. He needs to get outside that half a second slipstream margin if he can. If he can start to pull away by at least half a second, he might be able to get away from this battle in the final few moments of the race. Looks at the clock, he's going to tick to 0, so it looks like this is in fact the last lap of the race. Yeah, because here comes James Murphy up the hill and towards the last few corners, and as we say, not from disingenuous, but the racing behind these 4 has been so good. We haven't seen them too much in the closing stages here, particularly in the second half of the race, but that just shows how competitive it can be down the order as well. We'll pick that up in a second, but for this man, there really is no stopping him, is he? He was pretty rapid in the Euro Winter Series, he's been pretty rapid in the regular series as well, and I'm certain not just here but in real life in 2021, he will be once again. Up to the checkered flag to pick up the victory and the first transfer spot to the grand final. It goes to James Murphy here at Watkins Glen, the first round of the America's Road Tour for caterhamracer.com. The second transfer spot goes to Christian Zaruta, and 3rd to Blair McConaughey, 4 for Rossetti. And now we wait, because 5th backwards is quite a scrap amongst themselves. Here they come out the last corner. This is going to be a proper Caterham photo finish. It's going to be Guy Crawford that will get to the flag first. It's Crawford, Hassler, Parker, Skillicorn and Arnell just as quick as that. Then it's John Lang up in 10th place. The two Knights have dropped back a bit. In fact, Hudson finishes 11th. Something's happened on the last couple of laps, on the last lap at least, because Jason Knight's dropped back to 14th. So Paul Fernhoff 12th, Mark Bennett 13th, Jason Knight 14th, and then James Fowler and Tom Willis, the 2 chums from Academy, in 15th and 16th spot, and the last guy to come through is going to be Richard Gallagher, who also is in strife as well. And in typical caterhamracer.com fashion, everyone starts doing donuts down turn 1, because that's what you do at the end of the race. And they're done for the first evening, and of course there's 5 more to go to decide who wins this pre-season America's Road Tour before we get the real season underway in April, both in real life and also with our next proper point scoring season here on caterhamracer.com. So the results of that incredible first race for our America's Road Tour here at Watkins Glen is thus: James Murphy gets the first transfer spot to the final, as does also Christian Zaruta and Blair McConaughey. Top 3 in that first race there are guaranteed to race at Mont Tremblant in a few weeks time. Will Rossetti is 4th, a quite distant 4th, some 3 seconds back. Then the epic battle that we had for 5th place downwards is resolved in favour of Guy Crawford. He finishes 5th ahead of Jensen Hassler 6th. Andy Parker, who started on the front in the second round of the grid, finishes back in 7th. It's Chris Skillicorn, Steve Arnell, and John Lang on his first evening racing on his homemade setup. Impressive stuff to get himself into the top 10. It could have been a top 10 for Hudson Knight, but nonetheless, let's not take anything away. 11th place for the 11-year-old driver, the youngest driver that we've ever had. Fantastic mature driving from him. Good stuff, and I'd love to see him what he could do possibly in a real race car. Dare I say maybe a Fiesta Junior or something similar, but I guess we'll have to wait and see if he does take up any real racing. But for sim-wise, very good stuff from him indeed. 12th for Paul Fernhoff, 13th for Mark Bennett, 14th for Jason Knight after he dropped back in a few spots on the final few moments of the race. James Fowler 15th, Tom Willis back in 16th, and then Richard Gallagher was the last finisher, but albeit a further 20 seconds back from 16th place. And Jay Shepherd, sadly, after there was an incident a few laps in up at the inner loop, sadly he had contact which I think must have given him damage, which saw him retire from the race. Whew. And breathe. That was quite an extreme first race. And if that's a precursor to what we're going to get for the next 5 races, as you've done in the test races so far, Chris, I imagine we're in for possibly one of our most competitive seasons so far. We've only had about, obviously, 3 or 4 already anyway. But for this 4th season, all the races that we've had, that was one of the most competitive and exciting I've seen in a while. And incredibly, all that battling wasn't for the lead. It was further back towards the middle to bottom of the top 10. It just shows even behind some of the runaway front runners in this series, or in this particular server or collective of drivers that we have, some drivers have made big gains, others have pretty much stayed as strong as they always have been, and it means that we've got a really nice competitive field of drivers here, which means that the next round coming into Lagos, particularly as it's quite a slipstream filled circuit with lots of fast long straights, I can't wait for next week, because that should be even more as epic on those long straights as it was here at Watkins Glen.
I was going to say, all that eventful racing and epic side by side, and what did it count for? Absolutely nothing. They've got to do it all again. It only counts if you get one of those qualifying spots, and we saw them completely sort of taken away by well, I guess the usual 3, although Blair McConaughey, obviously that's a great result for him, coming in there in 3rd. So I'd quite like to speak to James. I guess we didn't see him much on camera, so let's see whether we can have a quick word with James after another victory there, James.
Good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
It's a good habit to be getting in with, isn't it?
Yeah, that was lovely. I was literally just winding about the feed and watching an amazing race for 5th place, which you guys enjoyed, and the drivers definitely did. Yeah, I had a race rather different for me. Luckily, got away at the start. I think Will and Christian seem to be fighting, and that, as you often say, once you break the toe, as long as you get your head down, you don't make mistakes. It's just churning out the laps from there. So wouldn't call it straightforward, because it requires, as always, a lot of focus. But fun in its own way. But certainly not as much fun as the guys have for the battle for 5th.
Yeah, once Will and Christian had stopped fighting, it looked like he might have a chance, but I think, again, you just got your head down, and it was just enough to keep him back. And I guess he settled in after that, he wanted to protect his 2nd place. But congratulations, qualifying. You've done the hard work already, so the rest of the races are going to be fun for you.
They are. We're looking forward to them, though. It's a great series. Tracks we don't know in real life, or most of us don't know anywhere in real life. So looking forward to the rest of it. Thank you.
Great. Speak soon. Okay, and let's get Christian's not on my thing, so let's get he is in there, so let's grab him. So hey Christian, how you doing?
Very good.
Yeah, so qualifying space done and dusted. It looked pretty hectic towards the beginning of that race with Will Rossetti, but you came out on top eventually.
He didn't want to play the game. I was trying to encourage some slipstreaming to catch up with James again, but he did not seem particularly interested.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of side by side, which obviously compromises you, but I imagine it was fun racing nonetheless.
It was fun, and that Murphy's the slippery sausage, isn't he?
He's
so we'll have to...
certainly a slippery sausage, yes. But anyway, qualifying position done, so the rest of them are a bit of fun up until Mont-Tremblant, but a good start to the season, I'd say.
Yeah, all good, all fun. Thank you again.
Okay.
Most enjoyable.
We will speak to you soon.
Cheers, mate.
And we'll get Blair in the commentary box as well. Blair, have you got us?
Yes, I can hear you, Cheesy.
A qualifying spot didn't look likely at the beginning there, but some battles happening in front of you that kind of opened up and you made your way through in opportune moments.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't quite have the pace of qualifying. It's not a track I really know. I seemed to gel with it through the race, but it was definitely just a case of keeping my nose clean, a little bit of luck. Second half of the race was quite boring, but good boring. I don't mind boring when you come on the podium.
I encourage you to look back at the stream because we weren't watching you. You were like you say, boring. So we watched the exciting racing going on behind you, which counted for nothing. But anyway, you got your qualifying spot in the bag, and that must take the pressure off for the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. It was quite a surprise. I didn't think I would get through certainly in the first race, but yeah, pressure off, and I can enjoy the rest of the season. And yeah, it's going to be good. Keep up the good work, guys.
Congratulations. We'll speak to you soon. Cheers.
Thanks.
There you go, Scott. So yeah, like we said, the top of the field didn't have the most exciting of times after the first, 5 minutes or so, but we had certainly plenty to talk about.
We did, and it was certainly entertaining nonetheless, as it always tends to be with caterhamracer.com. And of course, if you enjoyed that, the best thing is, of course, we still have 5 more races to go. It's, again, just a reminder, same format as it was for the Euro Winter Series. So we've got Interlagos coming up for the second qualification race next week, same time, Tuesday 8:30 p.m. And then we've got, of course, the 2 more qualification races, Road Atlanta on the 2nd of March, Road America on the 9th of March. Then we go to Laguna Seca a week later after that for the last chance saloon. It's a bit like, if anyone's ever watched the races like the Formula Ford Festival or the Walter Hayes Trophy, where they have a last chance race, it's pretty much the same thing, like a repechage race. So pretty much you have to finish, I guess, within the top 3 or whatever position you need to finish in order to get yourself a spot into the grand final. And it will be, of course, at a Canadian track, of course, the brilliant and beautiful, it's a beautiful location, brilliant and beautiful Mont-Tremblant circuit will host the grand final on the 23rd of March. And of course, then it'll only be a couple of weeks until we get the real Caterham racing underway on April 10th, 11th at Cadwell Park, where, of course, Chris will be racing himself in his brand new 7 UK car in his quest, hopefully, to try and become the lucky driver who will become the second ever British Caterham champion. So I know you're excited about that, but plenty of excitement here to get ourselves our teeth into, particularly with our next race at Interlagos, and that's going to be quite an intense race. Chris, thanks as always again for live streaming, of course, and for being in the commentary box as always. It's always a pleasure, never a bore and never a chore. So just to quickly round off then, that's our first evening of racing done for season 4 of caterhamracer.com and the America's Road Trip. And just a reminder to give a thanks to our sponsors, because the America's Road Trip is sponsored by DPR. Let me get my information up back here again, because I do need that. Which is DPR Motorsport. So your competitive advantage by design and display structures. Immerse yourself in worlds beyond with bespoke projection screens, and by just Add Lightness, high-performance LED lights for the Caterham 7, and additional support from Darren, Burke, performance driver coach at FPZero Simulators. From both myself, Scott, and Chris, and everyone here at caterhamracer.com, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next week for our second qualification race, the America's Road Trip. We head to Sao Paulo, Brazil, in the Autodromo Jose Carlos Pache, and Interlagos awaits for the Caterhams. See you then.
See you then.